Iran and Israel have again traded airstrikes overnight. The Israeli military has said it completed a series of attacks in the heart of Tehran in a post on social media. The IDF said its targets included an industrial complex used for making missiles and the headquarters of a research and development centre for nuclear weapons. Iran has not commented on those overnight strikes. Its missiles, targeted at Israel, landed in the southern city of Beersheba, causing what local media described as heavy damage. Reports also said 5 people had been lightly injured. So let's show you the scene live in Tel Aviv at the moment. And we are monitoring these live shots and waiting for more information from the authorities and also news agencies around the world. Well, later today, European foreign ministers will meet their Iranian counterpart, Abbas Araghchi, in Geneva. They're hoping to try to de-escalate the crisis between Iran and Israel and find a negotiated solution which averts the threat of wider conflict. The talks involving foreign ministers of Britain, Germany and France, as well as the EU's foreign policy chief, come the day after President Trump's sudden announcement that he was delaying any decision on US military intervention. Earlier, Israel's defense minister said Iran's supreme leader can no longer be allowed to exist after an Iranian missile damaged a hospital in Beersheba in southern Israel on Thursday. Iran said it was targeting a military site nearby. Well, the North America correspondent Jake Kwan explains more about what options President Trump might have next.
This announcement of a 2-week deadline, I think there was a lot of speculation in Washington, as well as us watching, that perhaps America was very close to now deciding to take a direct intervention against Iran, perhaps striking Iran's nuclear facilities like the one in Fordo, where there is an enrichment plant deep underground where only America's bunker buster bomb could reach. But President Trump's this announcement that he will wait for 2 weeks to give room for negotiation until that decision is made, it really gives a great sense of relief for those of us who are watching, who believe that perhaps the decision was only a day or a few days away. At the same time, this 2-week deadline, it's now hanging a countdown clock essentially above this negotiation, above this conflict, and there's this sense that previously there was no countdown. Previously there was just this kind of dark ambiguity of what's going to happen. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But now, the question is, if that clock runs out and there's no real deal with the Iranians, then what happens? Then President Trump may be compelled to take military action. Now, what we understand is that there are some robust negotiations going on. President Trump's special envoy to Iran issue, Steve Witkoff, is having direct phone calls with the Iranian foreign minister, as well as Europeans will be meeting with Iranians on Friday to work up some kind of deal that they can take back to Americans and say, hey, Iranians are willing to give up this much. Can we make that 2 weeks into 2 months and maybe 2 years? So that is really the diplomatic off-ramp that everyone involved here is looking for.
David Lammy, Britain's David Lammy, met with the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio for those crisis talks a number of hours ago. What exactly came out of them? Because we have got the talks that are going to be taking place in Geneva later today, which I'm going to discuss with Kashaya. But what can you tell us about the Rubio-Lammy discussions?
So the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, was here in Washington earlier, and he met with his American Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, as well as the Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff. And the 3 men essentially were discussing what is a deal that the Americans will be happy with, that they can agree on. And this is very important because, Secretary Lammy will be traveling to Geneva to talk to Iranians to get their idea of what the deal could be. And, the real challenge here, of course, is President Trump has already sort of vetoed the last time the Europeans have negotiated a deal with the with the Iranians, when President Obama and the Europeans, as well as the UN Security Council, had a deal in 2015 that the Iranians have accepted, where Iranians were supposed to give up their enriched uranium in exchange for sanctions relief. That deal, President Trump called it the most horrible deal. As soon as he was in the office, he scrapped that deal. And since then, the Iranians have been enriching uranium again. They said that this is for civilian usage. But President Trump, obviously does not believe that. So this is going to be a lot of convincing President Trump. And for Secretary Lamy, and the Europeans, really, they have a big kind of task at their hands. But there's just the fact that this, negotiation is now given room of 2 weeks. Secretary Lamy was really hitting a hopeful note today in the readout of the meeting, saying that, there's now a chance to stop the world from sliding into a bigger conflict here.
And that was Jake Kwan. Kashaya Junaidi is from BBC Persian, part of BBC World Service, also in Washington for this particular story. And Kashaya, just first off then, let's just pick up on those talks that are coming up, being held in Geneva with the EU and also Iran and EU leaders, rather. The UN is not going to be taking part. They have commented. But how seriously should we take the comment from President Donald Trump that there is a substantial chance of negotiations and possibly a deal?
Well, the Iranian side is looking to have a diplomatic outcome to this war, a diplomatic solution that could stop the war and stop the pressure that Israel is inserting on the regime. So they would try to find a way to finish this war without with a diplomatic solution. So that's why they're going to meet today in Geneva with the Europeans. And on the other side, Reuters was reporting yesterday that Steve Witkoff, the American envoy for Middle East, has talked to the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi after the war has started. And accordingly, Iranians have showed the willingness to show some flexibility in the nuclear talks as long as Israel stops the attacks. So, of course, the Iranians have said there will be no face-to-face meeting as long as with the Americans, of course, as long as the war continues. But they're hopeful that they could find a window of possibility that Israeli attacks would stop without the U.S. getting involved militarily in the war, so they could find a settlement. And of course, because all the pressure, all the blows that have been, all the hits to their military installations, their missile depots, their nuclear facilities, they are much more under pressure to relent at the current time, so there is more chance of flexibility on the Iranian side.
Kashaya, I'm just wondering about what this would mean for Iran's allies, particularly in this so-called axis of resistance, if the US were to enter this war.
Well, there was always a concern that if there is a military confrontation between Iran and the United States, the so-called proxy allies of Iran in the region, no matter either in Lebanon, Hezbollah, or the Yemen, the Houthis, or somewhere else in Iraq, the Shia militia, they will react against the Americans and attack U.S. bases. In the past year, during the last year of President Biden's presidency, what we witnessed in the Middle East was the collapse of the so-called axis of resistance. The Israelis managed to severely hit and damaged Hezbollah structures. The Houthis have been under attack from both the Americans and the Israelis. And on the other side, the Syrian regime, Bashar al-Assad's regime, which was the most important ally of the Islamic Republic in the Arab world, collapsed. So what is remaining of the once so-called axis of resistance is this Shia militia in Iraq. And so far, they've been keeping low profile, showing unwillingness to enter this war. And there is a reason for it, because first of all, there are different Shia militias in Iraq. Some of them are more loyal to the Iranian regime, some less. But for all of them, they risk entering this war. they would risk like losing US support for the Iraqi economy, and the Iraqi economy would be under a lot of pressure if the US withdraws from supporting it. And the Iraqi army will also the Americans will stop supporting the Iraqi army as well, and that will be a severe blow to the Shia majority in Iraq. So they are not really that inclined to get into this conflict. On the other side, Grand Ayatollah Sistani, a major leader in the Shia world who resides in Iraq, has also warned the Americans about attacking Iranians. But this has been more like a warning, and we haven't seen the militia in Iraq entering this phase of war with to support Iran.
Okay, Kashai, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, speaking to the BBC on Thursday, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister warned President Trump not to get involved in the conflict.
We are on diplomacy, and but until this aggression continues, under this bombardment, under these brutal atrocities that is happening against my country, nobody can go for negotiation. Look, the moment that this aggression stops, of course diplomacy is the first option. But now what we are seeing and what we are hearing from Americans, that they are thinking of getting involved in this war. We think that this war is not American war, but if they would like to get into this war, President Trump will be remembered forever for a war that it was not his war, but dragged in. And this will be a quagmire, and this will be hell for the whole region.
But isn't this a big risk? Isn't this a big risk for Iran? Iran is no match for the world's biggest military power, and the people of Iran are already suffering enormously.
Look, when there is a foreign aggression, there is a national unity, and what you are seeing right now is this exactly national unity which is happening inside and outside Iran. This is not a matter of who has the superiority in hard power. This is a matter of resistance.
OK, let's speak to our correspondent, Dan Johnson, who's in Jerusalem for us. Hello there to you, Dan. I wonder, first off, any more detail you can tell us about these strikes across southern Israel from Iranian missiles?
Yes, we know that missiles were fired from Iran towards the Negev region of Israel early this morning, and at least one of those missiles has got through and has hit a technology park in Beersheba, the sort of place that there are offices for Microsoft and other international companies. There are fires burning there. We've seen some video from the scene that shows a number of fires on the ground being tackled by firefighters. There are paramedics responding to that scene as well, because some nearby residential buildings have also been damaged, and at least 5 people are reported to have been wounded in that missile strike early this morning. That is the same area that the Iranians hit the hospital yesterday, where lots of people were injured. It looks like, they said yesterday, they were trying to target the technology park when they hit the hospital. It looks like they've gone back to that target today and have hit it once again. So that underlines to people just what the sort of risk is as this conflict continues. There were further Israeli airstrikes overnight on the Iranian capital and on Iran's nuclear research organization's headquarters. And the hope is that with the talks happening in Geneva today, that this sort of exchange of firepower will come to an end. Donald Trump's laid out this 2-week window for negotiations for talks to take place, and the first step on that road to any sort of peace deal is the talks that the British Foreign Secretary David Lammy is involved in today in Geneva with his Iranian counterpart, supported by the German and French foreign ministers as well. But on the ground in Israel, just those strikes in the south of the country and at least one missile that has got through. The fires are still burning there. The emergency team still responding at that scene in Beersheba.
Dan, obviously Mr. Netanyahu has been commenting on the possibility of the US joining this war. He has said they can go ahead without the US. Can they really?
They can continue doing what they've done for the last week or so, firing missiles at various Iranian sites, mostly linked to its nuclear program. But there are certain sites within that program that Israel suspects of being key to the Iranian nuclear weapons ambition that are in bunkers tucked away in mountains, and that is where the Israeli firepower cannot reach. That is why the Israelis, if they really want to attack those sites and negate any threat from an Iranian potential nuclear weapons program, they need those heavier US weapons to reach those sites and to make sure they could be destroyed. That is why Benjamin Netanyahu has been seeking the support of Donald Trump, who could supply those weapons. But Donald Trump says that he is hoping in the 2-week window that he's leaving now before he makes that decision whether to go ahead with the plan that has been laid out. He is hoping that the Iranians will seriously negotiate to come to some sort of deal to reassure the Israelis that there is no threat to them from this nuclear program that Iran is accused of running, not just to power the country, but also to threaten Israel and some other neighbours. So that is the sort of discussion that will be started, hopefully, today by the foreign ministers who are meeting in Geneva. But that would only be the first step. There would have to be different rounds of talks involving different levels of leadership, politicians, military commanders. What sort of a deal we could be talking about is a big open question, and how serious the two sides about actually reaching some sort of negotiated deal is an open question. The Israelis certainly want to continue firepower to take out the Iranian nuclear program. That is their preferred option, but Donald Trump is seeking a negotiated settlement instead.
Dan Johnson, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.